Thanks for joining us today on the Holistic Selling podcast. It is a privilege to welcome Dan Corazzi to this episode. Dan is a seasoned C-level executive in the SaaS B2B industry with over 25 years of leadership experience driving growth, transformation, and customer-centric innovation. Dan currently serves as CEO of Solify, where he's leading the company's next phase of global expansion in secured finance. Throughout his career, Dan has built a reputation as a commercially driven, customer-first leader. His leadership philosophy centers on customer success as the primary driver of growth, emphasizing alignment between customer outcomes and company execution. He is known for fostering high-performance teams, simplifying complexity, and executing with clarity in dynamic, fast-evolving markets. So you can see why I'm excited to have Dan with us today to share his insights. So Dan, welcome to the show. Would you like to add a few words to your introduction?
Sure. Thanks for that. That was awful nice of you, Bernard. As Bernard said, I am Dan Corazzi, and I've been CEO for a couple years here now at Solify. It's been a dynamic and fun experience at this portion of my career. When Bernard asked me to spend a little bit time here on the Holistic Selling podcast, I was absolutely in favor of doing that. Bernard and I had the pleasure of working closely together from 2022 to 2024 in just some wonderful efforts at Jagger that ended in a very positive ending for us. But more importantly, Bernard, in the role that he was in, impacted the business as much as any seasoned sales leader that I've ever worked with. So was excited to have this conversation.
Well, thank you for that as well. You were a great leader that created a fantastic culture for us to operate in. So it was definitely a fantastic time. As you know, and you will appreciate this very much in your role, the holistic selling framework is built on two fundamental principles: customer centricity and frontline empowerment. Its premise is that all layers, processes, and functions of an enterprise must be aligned and synchronized to remove the frictions and conflicts that are preventing an organization from delighting its customers and prospects at every touch point. A key part of that, then, and you and I have talked about this in the past, is culture. So as a CEO now, how important is culture in guiding your company to success? Also, how do you define it, and how do you ensure that everyone in the organization lives by that culture every day?
So one of my favorite topics, since we work so closely together, you'd probably know that this is near and dear to my heart. I don't think that there's anything more important, Bernard, in a company than a company's culture. Amongst our values at Solify, we start with a motto, and the motto is employees first, customer always. And I'm intentional of putting employees first because I don't think you get to customer success and customer satisfaction unless those employees come first as part of it. And that really is what culture is all about. For me, when I think of culture, I think of things like values, I think of norms, and I think of expectations. And my job as a CEO is try to set that culture. What I've seen over 30 plus years is that what people believe matters. So that kind of perception thing, how people behave inside of the process, making decisions matters. What gets rewarded or corrected at an individual basis matters. And having the right operating rhythm from the top can define that right culture. We did 2 acquisitions. I will tell you, they were large acquisitions. And although there was geographic fit, there was product fit, for me, it started with, can I make sure that their culture fits in with the culture of Solify? If I can't make that culture fit, we can't be successful. So I think we believe it and breathe it every day. Lastly, I would just say on culture, how do you ensure that everyone lives by that? And the way we do it here is that we can't just have an ELT or an SLT own it. I have to have every individual in the organization being part of the culture, because Dan doesn't own it. We all own that culture. So big believer in culture.
I love what you said about beliefs, behaviors, rewards and corrective actions. Is there anything in particular that you do on an everyday basis through interactions with your team at the ELT level or with the frontline team members to reinforce that culture?
Yeah, I like to drop in on meetings that I'm probably not initially invited to. I like to make calls at all different levels of the organization. We have 7 offices around the globe, from Sydney to Bangalore to Canada to Germany. And I make sure I'm spending time a couple times a year in each of those offices so that we're breeding that culture and we're making sure we're bringing the C-level suite to that particular region, and just making sure we're touching the people and we're doing the right things on a daily basis.
That's very well said. Your willingness and passion for involvement with the employees around the world is really commendable. A big part of that is cross-functional alignment. It's really important to be able to achieve success. What best practices have you seen to actually make it work from your CEO position?
So, starting from a cross-functional perspective, I'll start high for a second. If you look at my ELT executive leadership team is 10 and it's fully cross-functional. So, the highest level leader in each of those functions. For me, it starts with a single shared definition of what success is cross-functionally. So, if we set culture aside for a second, how do I make sure that cross-functional alignment is there? We have to agree on what's important. Probably not surprising from a B2B software provider. It's ARR growth, it's retention, gross and net retention with the customer. It's EBITDA, it's customer satisfaction, and it's employee satisfaction. You can order those in whatever way you want, but all are very critical. When you step a layer below that, what we try to do from a best practice perspective is we translate that into some small subsets cross-functionally. So there is a leader, a cross-functional leader for HR, finance, marketing, support, et cetera. We hold that one leader accountable plus one person below that leader, and then we kind of define how we're going to work cross-functionally with that group. Additionally, I would say when you work cross-functionally, there needs to be a single source of the truth. I know you personally, Bernard, are a big believer in this. For us, that single source of the truth is Salesforce from a customer and CRM perspective. It's NetSuite for us from a finance perspective. It's Jira from a customer support perspective. So that interlocking cross-functionally is important. And then lastly, I would say, how do we make sure we have a tight operating cadence on that cross-functional work? So my ELT meets once weekly. The SLT, which consists of 50 people, meets monthly. And then we go in N+2 with different parts of that group at different cadences throughout the month. And so we try to do as much as pushing the people together and defining what those measurables are for a cross-functional activity.
I think that's very well said. I love the fact that cross-functional alignment is not just a concept for you or an abstract point of view. It is really something that you've instrumented into the business, single definition of what success means, cross-functional collaboration through the organization, and then what you said about the operating cadence of the business to hold everybody accountable and aligned with that definition of success. So that's really excellent.
One other comment that I would make when I'm in an interviewing process, either if it's for my ELT or SLT, usually one of the 5 or so questions I ask somewhere in that process is, how do you as an individual work cross-functionally, and give me examples of cross-functional success? So I don't want to just know how that leader or executive or whatever works in their silo. I want to know how they work cross-functionally. So it even starts, for those who aren't in the organization, for me, it starts before I even hire them.
Yeah. That's great to hear, because you and I have seen situations in our respective pasts where each functional leader has their own functional metrics, and those functional metrics don't necessarily align with the greater good or the company vision, and it starts putting things apart when that happens. So your role as a CEO is obviously critical to ensure that all those functional metrics align with that single definition of success.
For sure. Agreed.
Excellent. So something that you and I share and have practiced together is customer centricity. And I've seen you in action, and I believe that definitely it's core to your belief. So how do you architect customer centricity in your organization to make sure that you make your customers the heroes of your story every day?
So a couple things with that. First, it starts with really walking the walk and not just talking the talk with customer centricity. When I first stood up in front of all of Solify, the first thing I said was, we're all responsible for customer success, not just certain levels, but every employee in the company is responsible for it. And whatever your function is, if you don't think you're touching the customer today, you're wrong, because we all touch it. So it starts there with this customer always theme. Like most organizations, we hired a chief customer officer about a year into my tenure, and we came up with about 8 pillars that we felt were critical in customer centricity, Bernard. So first was, and I work with Sarah, my CCO, on this, the strategy, which has the vision and the promise from a customer perspective. So it starts up there. Then we went to customer segmentation and tiers. You certainly built this out at Jagger. Not every customer is the same. So a tier one customer and a tier four customer need to be treated and operated slightly differently. So we defined the tiers. Then here we did a lot of journey mapping. We had teams look at each of our products, go through all steps of the process and say, how do I operate in each of these steps, not from the role that I'm in, but in the customer's lens. So we did customer journey mapping. We've built out our customer health metrics, our health hubs, our heal desks, and all those things to support the customer. Then we went to one that is really important to me as a father of 3 girls in their 20s and everything around the word communication, making sure that customer communications had a life cycle, it had a normal cadence, and there was a consistency on how we communicate to the customers. We then built our advocacy program. So you can't be successful if you don't have strong references. Here at Solify, we have an ECAB, an advisory board. We have a TAC committee, a technical board that focuses on the customers. And then the last 2 pieces I would say are then putting those measurables in place. For us, there was CSAT, there was NPS, there were different health measurables. And then lastly, defining the moments of truth and saying, what's the process and governance to manage everything that I just defined prior to that? So I think we've worked diligently. I think we still have years of work more to come on it, but I do think we have the right strategy to say, this is really customer centric, and let's get everybody in the organization believing that they're active and supportive of the customer.
I think what I love about this is it's not just you saying we are all responsible for customer success, but it's also you and your team backing it up with a set of principles and operating guidelines that embody customer centricity through all the operations of the company. And I think this is very unique. Everybody says our customers are the center of the universe, but when we look at what's happening in practice, there's a lot of functional differences as to what that means, and it does not always convert to delivering great experiences to customers and prospects at the moment of truth. So the way that you build an organization with those principles, from the vision, the promise, customer segmentation, all the way to the metrics and the moments of truth, is testament to your leadership style and what you've been able to do with your team. So congrats on that. I think that's fantastic.
I would add one, I'd add one more, just one more quick thought, because I think when you're standing up, when any of us stand up as a leader, I think it's always lead by example. And I know when you and I were together, we spent a lot of time on customer, being in the field and doing the right things for the customer. On my first stand up, which was day actually 2 in Spain, I said to everybody, I'm going to meet 100 customers in 100 days, the first 100 days. And through probably 40% of that in person and then the rest in Teams and Zoom, I did 102 customers in the first 100 days. At the end of the 100 days, I went to the team, the entire company, and I said, if you don't think I believe in customer satisfaction and customer first, then you're kidding ourselves. And if I can do it, everybody in this company can be customer focused. So I think that lead by example is highly critical, Bernard.
That's absolutely fantastic. And you're right. At the end of the day, everyone in the organization will look at what you are doing and where you're spending your time and what you believe in. Are you walking the talk, right?
Yep.
And when you're walking the talk as a CEO, then the message is very clear.
Yep.
There's no divergence. There's no cognitive dissonance. You're talking about it and then you're walking the talk. that is very clear as to what it is that they need to do in their respective function. And obviously enabling the whole customer life cycle from getting the right prospects on board, nurturing them, converting them, obviously engaging with them, ultimately creating the right differentiation, closing the deal, as well as implementing and then retaining, growing, and converting to advocates is part of the whole customer journey that you've been able to implement there. As you've implemented all of this, have you seen a change in the culture of the organization? Has your leadership style changed the culture or the way the company was operating before you joined?
I think when you add additional leaders to my team who also have that same mentality and are doing those same things on a daily basis, I don't think it has a choice but to start to change and move in that direction. If it doesn't change and if it doesn't do those things, then you need to change people and move the pieces around the chessboard. So yes, I think we've seen that change, and now we're really using the measurables, real metrics, and we spent a lot of time on that with our board and our financial sponsor, talking about those metrics meet customer satisfaction as well. So yeah, I've seen that change, but it's an evolution and we can always get better. And I say this all the time, and I know you believe this SaaS software world that we've moved to over the last 10 years, and now the AI world is so extremely complex with the need to be up 7 by 24, security at such an all-time high, an ecosystem of partners that usually APIs their way into the world. It makes satisfying the customer more difficult and it's complex. So no one's perfect, and it will always be an evolution and it will always be growing.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's building trust, one moment of truth, one interaction at a time. And if you have the right culture in place, then more often than not, you will deliver the right interaction at the right time and build that trust. And it's a compounding effect over time. So well done. Another point of that I wanted to discuss today is frontline empowerment. You and I know from our 2 or 3 decades in the industry that a common saying in the software industry is that the frontline team members, the sales reps, the account managers typically only spend about 30% of their time customer facing and 70% of their time dealing with the internal mechanics of trying to agree on what to do with this customer. And it's a big drag on sales productivity and account management. What would be your recommendations to be able to increase the time that the frontline team members spend interacting with customers?
So now you've hit the passion of the discussion for you and I, Bernard. So
Yes.
I think we're going to be aligned on this one. Much like I had said earlier, when I stood up in front of that large group and said about being in front of the customer, the other thing I also said as a sales led CEO is every person in the company is in sales and needs to be out there breathing in and being in front of the customer. And how do we empower to do that? And that means every level, not just pre-sales and sales and CSMs. It's everybody. So it starts there. But some of the things that we have done over, I'll call it the last year, probably not different than a lot of companies. We have forced the elimination of a lot of team meetings, a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of stuff that isn't absolutely critical, and making sure that we're empowering people to be in front of the customer. We, for our largest customers, and I know you're a large advocate of this, we have QBRs in person with the customer on a quarterly basis with a cross-functional group. So that forces us to be out there. We have executive sponsors. My ELT and SLT each has their own handful of customers that they're executive sponsors for. So I think that is critical as part of things. Some of the people in the company who hadn't touched customers in the past and do a lot of back office activity, we have sent to conferences and other places where customers are to give them that face time and that interaction. And then also engineers and customer support people who might sit in the back office. We've advocated to not only do that and to get off of other meetings and actually be part of customer calls and customer meetings to fix things. So I think, how do you move that 30% and the 70%? You force people to be involved with the customer and change the way they're interacting on a daily basis. I will say, in this remote world post COVID, it is one of the toughest things to do. It is not easy,
Right.
but you've got to measure it and manage it on a day by day basis.
Yes. And one of the the things you've been doing very well through your career is simplifying complexity. That applies to organizations, doesn't it? If you can simplify the organization and simplify the processes and procedures the frontline team members have to go through to be able to deliver value to customers at every touch point, that's going to improve their ability to spend more time customer facing. You've already mentioned some of them, but have you done anything else to simplify the organization so that it's easier for the frontline team members to deliver value to customers and prospects?
Yeah, there's one big project that comes to mind when you bring that up. And I got this from my years of working with Bill McDermott, who's now at ServiceNow and was our leader at SAP. And one of the taglines there around 2017, 2018 was SAP runs simple. People would look at that and go, how can that be? The reason behind that was you needed to take the complexity out. And he did do that. And so what we've done here is we've done a project on lead to cash, basically across every function in the business on processes that have been in place probably for decades. And we've relooked at them and went through a step-by-step process to say, how can we eliminate steps in each of those areas and make things more simple? Whether that's building a proposal, whether it's quote to cash, whether it's in customer support, wherever it is. But we are spending about 6 months on the entire lead to cash process to really focus on simplicity, Bernard.
I love that because ultimately we've all been there. We get into internal calls, internal meetings, and we got to convince everybody in the company that what we're going to offer to the customer is right for the company. Simplifying the process, eliminating steps, ensuring that you can run simpler operations ultimately converts to better quality of service and experience to the customers and your frontline being able to spend more time in front of customers with less time spent internally. And frankly, if that 30-70 equation could become 60-40, you basically have doubled the time that your frontline team members spend talking to customers, which will convert to a significant increase in productivity, a significant increase in conversion rates and win rates. So it's awesome. Once again, you have taken the concept and you've actually implemented it into a process, a procedure, and a project, an initiative to actually simplify your operations, eliminating steps to actually make this happen. So
Yeah, and
congratulations to you and your team.
thank you. And I would, one other thing I would add is when you do that and you start to enable simplicity, all companies at different levels have frustrations, and particularly at sales, pre-sales, and services who become the front line of what ultimately becomes a customer. If those frustrations go away, there'll be less of that is carried to the customer, and they'll be focused on better things. And so part of that is with the end in mind and customer satisfaction, but you got to get your internal team believing it and seeing it, making their life easier, which in result makes a better customer experience.
No doubt. Very well said. Last but not least for today, obviously, AI is top of mind. What have you seen as the impact of AI, not only on your internal operations, but also on your ability to successfully engage with customers and prospects?
We could probably spend an hour on AI. So I'll try to do this in 2 minutes. It's timely that you asked the question because we just came out of delivering our strategic plan to the board on AI. So we had a 8-hour meeting last week. And so for the last 9 months, we have put our Solify AI strategy in place. And I'll quickly break it up between internal and externals. Internally, as a Microsoft shop, we're using Copilot and we're going across every function. And I can give you examples in finance, HR, sales, marketing, go down the list, how we're using AI and we're measuring it. And we're reporting to the board how we're using this functionality to be more productive internally. So that's on the internal side. More importantly, on the customer side, two big things. We are starting to use Anthropic and Claude and Forged. And we're a couple months into that process. And probably like a lot of companies, we're taking a agentic approach to where we're going. Two quick examples. One, once you load, your entire stack into Claude and you do that appropriately and from a proper security perspective, you can start to dig in. So we took a feature and a bug that was spec'd for 2,000 man hours. If you do the math on it, it's a developer for almost 3/4 of a year. Pretty expensive. We loaded all of that into Claude. And in a matter of 30 minutes, Claude was able to not only fix and remediate the problem, deliver it to 100% accuracy, and be done in 30 minutes. Now, when you start thinking about that as a software company that has a ton of life cycle to build with new products, existing products, defects, and where this can take you, it is absolutely staggering, Bernard. So we are mixing that in with current products to make us better with those. We will build our new products with an agentic forward-looking scheme. And I would say to any employee of any organization out there, if you're not AI personally ready, your role is probably in jeopardy in the future. No matter what your role is, you have to have an AI forward approach to doing things. So lots and lots going on there.
That's fantastic. Once again, you've taken the concept and implemented it in practice for both internal productivity as well as external customer success. In summary, we've talked about a lot here, Dan. You started about the definition of culture, employees first and customers always, and how you align the values, the norms, the expectations, the beliefs, the behaviors, the reward, the corrective actions towards that definition of culture at Solidify. I love the way that you are actually aligning all the functions with a single shared definition of success. Success not defined only by financial metrics, AR, GR, NR, EBITDA, but also customer success and employee success, because they all matter, and how you've implemented your cross-functional leadership at every level with a single source of truth and the interlocking between the functions and the operating cadence to make it stick on top of that. We've also instrumented and operationalized customer centricity by way of the principles and the initiatives that you talked about, from the vision and the promise to customer segmentation, customer journey mapping, customer health metrics, customer communication, advocacy programs, the customer advisory board, the metrics, and instrumenting the moments of truth. So again, taking a concept, a notion, and then instrumenting it into the lifeblood of the business on an everyday basis, which is absolutely fantastic. We talked about customer centricity in terms of improving the customer facing time, eliminating frictions and conflicts internally at every level, making it easier to have more time customer facing by eliminating internal meetings and Zoom calls and the like. And finally, this concept of Solidify runs simple, how you eliminate steps in your process and eliminating the frustrations that enable the frontline team members to deliver better experiences to customers. And last but not least, your AI strategy, once again, taking AI and making it an entire program by using Copilot internally to improve productivity, as well as using Claude and other tools to enable a faster response to customer problems and being able to improve the productivity of your team when it comes down to improving how you delight customers and prospects at every stage of the process. So very impressive what you've been able to do in a couple of years, Dan. But before we adjourn, I would like to turn it back to you and give you a chance to tell the audience what your call to action is today. What would you like the audience to take away from this podcast?
I guess very simply, to stay on this simple theme, here's what I would say. And I'd say this to whatever level you are in an organization, whether you're at the customer support level or you're in the C-suite. We are in the software business. We are not producing or creating nuclear fission. I think personally, it's all about trust, honesty, open communication, accountability, lead by example. And lastly, maybe because it's my 35 years in business, having some fun and passion in what you're doing. I think if at every level of who you are as an individual, if you can bring those things to play, I think you'll be successful as an individual. I think your company will be more successful. And ultimately, on the theme of where we started in holistic selling and customer satisfaction, you'll have satisfied customers, Bernard. So I think you and I know each other well enough that I strongly believe in those things. And if I was telling, as I tell my kids who are in their 20s and in the business world, follow those things and the rest will be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to end. So thanks again for the opportunity to spend a half hour with me today, and thanks for sharing your insights with everyone on the call listening to the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bernard.